Riding a wave is like suddenly gaining speed and gliding at the same time, like walking on water, like flying. I think it's really about being one with a natural phenomenon. The surfboard requires a lot of ergonomic thinking. How do I stand on it? How do I not slip off? But at the same time, it really has to work in that fluid environment. It's really considering for the rider in some areas and for water and physics in others. A surfboard is made out of a core element which tends to be foam, which makes the board float. And the skin of the board is some kind of resin, epoxy, sometimes even fiberglass. There often is also a stringer, a wooden piece down the middle, which makes it stronger. The rocker is the curvature of the board in the front. That is important because that determines what kind of wave you'll be able to take and how steep the wave is. The tail affects performance. Different tails will make the board react differently. So it's all about personal preference. Our understanding about surfing comes from when the Tahitians in 1200 AD brought it to Hawaii. So when James Cook arrived around 1780, he was mesmerized by hundreds of people in the water, children, women, men, just surfing. Calvinist missionaries arrive and they are scandalized by it. It becomes an illegal activity and it becomes a counterculture. The father of modern surfing is a Hawaiian named Duke Kahanamoku. He's an extraordinary swimmer, wins gold at the Olympics in 1912, goes around the world to show his swimming, but brings surfboards and demonstrates surfing at the same time. Imagine people had never been surfing before. Suddenly, some person from a faraway place is standing on water, not just standing, he's riding on water. He comes back to Hawaii and they start to make more boats. Pre Second World War, you're still looking at big, heavy wood boats. Post Second World War, new materials and new technologies become available, and those make the boat lighter, more accessible, cheaper, but it continues to be a custom object, something that is made specifically or for a person or for a certain spot. It's a very symbiotic relationship between surfer and shaper. There are so many different criteria that affect the physics of how that surfboard is moving in water. A long board is typically used on smaller waves. The rider has a lot of style. You can walk the board, put your toes over it, do a hang turn. A short board will be faster. They're harder to ride. They sink under the body. Designs come at the intersection between those physical factors and really how I want to put myself in the water. It's an expression as much as it is a physical activity. The draw may be because water is so elusive, you can't find it, you can't change it. The best I can do is recognize what it does. The surf may be big and getting bigger and surging while you're in the water. The elements are changing, the wind is coming up. You have to be in symbiosis with the environment. You need to look and feel for everything that's happening around you. And yet it's so short, 5, 8, 15 seconds. It's fleeting and you have to go back at it. And I think that's what makes surfing so wonderful and adventurous.